Hey, and welcome to Broken Vows, the channel where real women tell the stories they never thought they'd speak out loud. Today's story is something else. A woman who thought she had the perfect marriage until a single hidden letter shattered everything. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about awakening. It's about power. So grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine, because what you're about to hear, it's one hell of a ride. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. For more than 3 decades, Margaret believed her life was a storybook. A quiet, unshakable love shared with Paul, the man she married in her early 20s. Together, they built a world of comfort and tradition, filled with familiar rhythms. The soft hum of morning coffee brewing, the worn pages of shared books, the gentle warmth of hands held through years of joy and struggle. Their home was a sanctuary, filled with laughter, family dinners, and memories etched into every corner. The walls held stories, birthdays celebrated, late-night talks, and the soft lullabies Margaret sang to their children. To outsiders, their marriage seemed perfect, the kind of love that grows stronger with every passing year. Margaret thought their bond was unbreakable, a fortress against time and change. She saw Paul as her rock, her protector, her constant companion. He was the man who held her hand through grief, who celebrated every triumph by her side. Together, they faced life's storms, emerging stronger each time. Every evening they settled into their ritual, a slow dance in the kitchen, the soft jazz playing in the background, their eyes locking with a quiet understanding that needed no words. The world outside melted away in those moments. She trusted him without question. Their love was a promise, silent but steadfast, a sacred vow etched in their hearts. Margaret often found herself watching him in quiet moments, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he would tuck a stray hair behind her ear, the warmth in his voice when he spoke her name. These small things were the pillars of her happiness. But even the strongest foundations can hide cracks beneath the surface. Margaret had no reason to doubt until the first small shift appeared. The way Paul began guarding his phone like a secret, turning it face down the moment she entered the room. The sudden weekend trips he called golf outings, where he left early and returned late, always avoiding her gaze. The unfamiliar scent of cologne he wore, not the one she had carefully chosen for him on their last anniversary. At first, she pushed the unease aside. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he was going through something she didn't understand. Maybe this was a phase, a quiet rebellion against the years of routine and comfort. After all these years, what did she really know about the man she thought she'd spent a lifetime with? Sometimes, late at night, she would lie awake, tracing the lines of his face in the dark, searching for answers. Was this really the same man who once promised forever? Was their love still alive beneath the silence growing between them? The house felt different now, quieter. Shadows lingered where there had once been light. The laughter of their children, now grown and living lives of their own, echoed faintly in empty rooms. But deep down, a whisper grew louder, a quiet question that kept her awake at night. What if the life she thought was perfect was nothing but an illusion? What if the man she trusted with her heart was hiding a secret too painful to face? Margaret pushed these thoughts away as best she could, wrapping herself in the fragile cocoon of hope and denial. Yet, somewhere beneath it all, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. The First Cracks. At first, it was just small things, easily dismissed, like whispers in a noisy room. But for Margaret, those whispers grew into a roar she could no longer ignore. Paul's phone had changed. It was no longer the familiar device she once casually glanced at over his shoulder during breakfast. Now it was guarded fiercely, face down on the table, always locked, always out of reach. The casual openness that had once defined their marriage was replaced by secrecy. There were the golf trips, which suddenly multiplied. Weekends spent away, with vague explanations and promises that never quite satisfied. The man who once shared every detail of his day was now a stranger, returning home late, tired but evasive. Margaret noticed the subtle shifts in his scent, a new cologne she had never seen in any store they frequented. She remembered buying his favorite bottle for their anniversary last year. This wasn't it. This was different. Something foreign, unfamiliar. She found herself asking questions she didn't want answers to. Why the sudden need for privacy? Why the guarded glances and hushed phone calls? Her friends, sharp-eyed and wise, began to notice too. At their weekly bridge games, the subtle changes in Margaret's demeanor didn't go unnoticed. "Are you sure everything's all right?" they asked gently, eyes filled with quiet concern. Margaret forced smiles and nodded, but inside a storm was brewing. She felt the cold fingers of doubt creeping into the warm cocoon of her life. Nights became restless. She would lie awake, listening to the quiet house, wondering what secrets it held. The ticking clock became a metronome, counting down the moments before the truth would reveal itself. Every day, the man she thought she knew slipped further away, replaced by shadows and silence. The laughter that once filled their home was now tinged with a sadness that neither dared speak aloud. And yet, Margaret held on to a fragile hope that this was just a passing phase, a momentary lapse in an otherwise perfect life. But deep inside, a voice whispered a terrifying question. What if it's something far worse? Chapter 3. The Letter. It was an ordinary Sunday afternoon, quiet and unassuming. The kind of day that seemed perfect for catching up on small chores long ignored. Margaret stood in the guest room, surrounded by forgotten relics of the past. Dusty photo albums stacked on shelves, unopened boxes from moves long ago, and the faint scent of old paper and memories. As she opened the drawer of the old dresser, a sudden flash of something unfamiliar caught her eye. Tucked beneath a pile of greeting cards and loose papers lay a worn envelope, yellowed slightly with age. The handwriting was neat but elegant, unlike anything she'd ever seen before. A careful script that spelled out one simple phrase: "For Paul." Her hands trembled as she lifted the envelope. A sudden chill ran down her spine, as if the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on her chest. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her ears. But curiosity and dread battled within her. Finally, she pulled the letter free. Inside, the page was covered in delicate ink, smudged in places, as though the writer had been crying while pouring out their heart. The words leapt off the page, burning into Margaret's mind. "Every moment with you makes me forget he exists. When will we be together for real? I hate sneaking around. I want all of you. I love you. Yours always, J." The letter was raw, desperate, and hauntingly intimate. It was more than just words. It was a confession of a secret world Margaret never knew existed. The warmth in her chest instantly turned to ice. Her mind spiraled back through the months, now painted in a new light. The late nights Paul came home, the whispered phone calls he took in the garage, the evasive answers when she asked where he'd been. the unfamiliar scent of cologne clinging faintly to his jacket. How could she have missed all this? How had she been so blind? Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the ink as she read the letter again and again, each word a dagger twisting deeper. The betrayal was unbearable. The man she had trusted with her whole life was living a lie. A double life, woven with secrets and stolen moments. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she was paralyzed by shock, the room spinning around her as the walls closed in. But beneath the shock, a fire ignited. A fierce, unyielding resolve. She refused to be a silent victim. She refused to let this secret destroy her without a fight. Carefully, she folded the letter, placing it in her pocket, as if holding onto a piece of evidence that might one day unravel the truth. The perfect life she had so carefully built was shattered in an instant. Questions flooded her mind. Too many to answer. Who was this woman named Jay? How long had this been going on? What had Paul told her? What had he hidden? And most terrifying of all, could she ever trust him again? Margaret sank into a chair, her hands trembling, tears falling freely now. The years of shared memories, the laughter, the love, all now seemed like fragile illusions. She felt alone in the silence, surrounded by shadows she never expected. That day, something inside Margaret changed forever. No longer the trusting wife, she was now a woman awakened to harsh truths, ready to confront a world that had been kept from her. The letter was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Hunt for Truth. After finding the letter, Margaret's world tilted on its axis. The familiar walls of her home, once a refuge, now felt like a cage trapping her in a web of lies. She knew she couldn't ignore what she had discovered. She had to know the truth, no matter how painful. The days that followed were filled with a restless determination. Margaret became a shadow in her own life, quietly observing, piecing together fragments of a story she never wanted to hear. She watched Paul closely. His guarded phone was never far from his hand, and every time it buzzed, a flicker of something unspoken crossed his face. Margaret's heart clenched. She tried calling the number herself once, but it went straight to voicemail. No name, no greeting. She searched through shared bank accounts, hoping to find a clue in unexplained charges. There it was. Several dinners at restaurants neither of them had ever visited together. Late-night hotel stays paid in cash. The evidence piled up quietly but undeniably. At night, she scoured his texts and emails when he wasn't around, careful and cautious. There was a thread of messages with someone saved only as Jay. Each text was filled with endearments, plans and secret meetings. The warmth of those words contrasted starkly with the cold betrayal Margaret felt. Her mind wrestled with every possibility. Was Paul unhappy? Was it a fleeting affair or something deeper? Did he love this other woman? Or was it simply an escape from a marriage that had grown stagnant? The more she uncovered, the heavier her heart became. The man she once trusted with everything was now a stranger hiding behind layers of deceit. But Margaret refused to break. She was fueled by a fierce need for answers, for closure, for the truth, no matter the cost. Late one evening, she confronted Paul directly, her voice trembling but firm. "Who is Jay? How long has this been going on?" For the first time in weeks, Paul's facade cracked. His eyes filled with guilt, regret, and something like sorrow. But his answers only deepened the wound. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." Margaret listened, torn between pain and a desperate hope that love might still survive. But some truths, once unearthed, refuse to be buried again. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Margaret had waited all day, rehearsing every word she would say. Her hands trembled, her breath shallow, but her mind was crystal clear. No more silence, no more pretending. When Paul walked through the front door that evening, carrying the weight of another business dinner in his step, she was waiting. Not with anger, not with screaming rage, but with a stillness more terrifying than any fury. The envelope sat on the table between them, opened, the letter folded beside it like a loaded weapon. Paul's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he didn't even try to lie. The silence was deafening. "How long?" Margaret asked, her voice steady. "I want the truth, Paul. Every ugly piece of it." He didn't speak at first, just stood there, caught in the gravity of his own collapse. Then finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, 2 years. 2 years. Margaret felt the breath leave her lungs. The room seemed to twist. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a second life, built in the shadows of the one they had built together. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Who is she?" "She's someone I met at work," Paul replied. "It started small. I didn't mean for it to go so far." Margaret stepped forward, eyes burning. "You didn't mean to lie to me every day for 2 years? You didn't mean to look me in the eye, share my bed, eat dinner at this table, knowing full well you were betraying everything we built?" "I didn't want to hurt you," he said pitifully. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "You didn't want to hurt me? You burned down our entire life, Paul. What do you think this is?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Not yet. Not in front of him. Not like this. I gave you 30 years. I gave you my youth, my body, my soul. I stood by you through everything. Your father's death, your career, the nights you doubted yourself. And you repay that by crawling into bed with someone else." Paul sat down, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't stop loving you." That broke something in her. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't stand there and pretend this was love. Love doesn't hide. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't leave letters from someone else buried in a drawer like a ticking bomb." He looked up at her, broken, but it was too late. "You killed it," she whispered. "Whatever we were, you killed it." The silence between them was now a chasm, deep, dark, and final. Margaret turned and walked out of the room, each step echoing like a drumbeat of war. She didn't look back. She couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Chapter 6. The Decision. The next morning the house was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence Margaret once cherished, with coffee brewing and birdsong drifting through open windows, but the hollow, heavy silence of a life ruptured. Paul slept in the guest room. She hadn't said a word to him since the confrontation. She couldn't. Words had become meaningless. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in her robe, clutching a cup of coffee, gone cold. Her wedding ring still sat on her finger like a shackle, heavy with years of promises now shattered. She stared at the wall across from her, not really seeing it, just thinking. Memories flooded her in waves. The first time he kissed her. The night he proposed. The birth of their son. All of it. Their entire life. Now tainted. Or maybe not tainted. Just redefined. She realized something in that stillness. The history hadn't vanished. It hadn't been erased. But it had changed. And so had she. A part of her wanted to scream. Another part wanted to disappear. But deeper still, something inside her stirred. Something sharp, clear, and burning. A woman doesn't survive 30 years of love, motherhood, compromise, and quiet sacrifices without learning how to rise when the world falls apart. She took off the ring and placed it on the table. Then she stood. She packed a single suitcase, not with chaos or fury, but with intention. She didn't need much, just enough. A few clothes, a journal, her strength. That's all. Paul heard her moving through the house and appeared in the hallway, his face pale and desperate. "Where are you going?" he asked. She looked him dead in the eyes. "I don't know yet," she said softly. "But away from here. Away from you." He reached for her, and for a moment, Margaret saw the man she married. Not the cheater, not the coward, but the man who once made her believe in forever. And she let go of him. "I need to remember who I was before you," she said. "And I can't do that in this house. Not with these lies clinging to the walls." He didn't stop her. He just stood there as she walked past him, suitcase rolling behind her like a drumbeat of liberation. As the front door closed behind her, Margaret stepped into the sunlight, not as a wife, not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her own story. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was hers. And that was everything. Chapter 7. The New Me. It had been 6 months. 6 months since Margaret walked out of the house she once called home. 6 months since she left behind a man who broke her heart. 6 months of rediscovering who she was. Not as a wife, not as someone's better half, but as herself. She moved into a small coastal town. Quiet, peaceful. A place where no one knew her as Paul's wife. A place where the air was thick with salt, where the waves crashed against the shore like a heartbeat, reminding her, "You're still here." At first, it was hard, lonely. The silence, no longer heavy with betrayal, was just empty. But emptiness, she learned, was a gift. It meant room to fill, space to rebuild. She took long walks in the morning, started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. Her hands, once used to folding laundry, balancing budgets, and cooking for someone who no longer saw her, now created color, emotion, life. She made friends, real ones. Women who had walked through fire and come out burning brighter. They laughed, cried, shared stories over glasses of red wine, and reminded her that she wasn't alone. She looked in the mirror one morning and didn't see sadness anymore. She saw fire, lines around her eyes etched from years of laughter and grief, grey strands in her hair that she no longer bothered to dye. A smile, not perfect, not forced, but real, earned. One day, while shopping at a bookstore, she saw a man smile at her, a gentle, respectful smile. He didn't know her history. He didn't see her scars. He just saw her. And for the first time she smiled back. Not with desperation or need, but with curiosity. She wasn't looking to be saved. She had already saved herself. Margaret had once believed her life was over the moment she lost her marriage. But the truth, that was the moment it began. She had been broken. Yes. But she didn't stay broken. She rebuilt piece by piece, breath by breath, until one morning she woke up and realized she was no longer mourning the life she lost. She was living the life she chose. Thank you for listening. If this story hit you in the heart, you're not alone. On this channel, we don't just talk about pain, we talk about survival. Subscribe to Broken Vows for more real stories from real women. every other day, because healing starts here. And sister, you are stronger than you think.